Welcome to episode 51 of the Creative Train podcast. This one is about creative routines and creative spaces. And it's funny, I just read something this morning on Substack about how if you're a pro, you shouldn't need a routine. You should just be able to go with the flow. And I 100% disagree with that. One of the most difficult things we have to do if we really want to get good at our stuff and get overall satisfaction up is have some sort of creative routine or creative space. These spaces and time that we dedicate to our craft, as well as practice and play, become much more than just creative space for your hobby. They become our solace, our happy place, and a place to heal. So the first step is stop thinking that you're being selfish about doing this stuff. Then you get to work. All aboard? This episode can easily be broken down and addressed point by point over several episodes because there's so much value to these routines and spaces that to just talk about them for a few moments here feels like I'm not really giving them the time they deserve. But through the history of this podcast, these topics have come up over and over again, and I readdress them whenever they come up in my daily routines and my work schedule, because I think if I need to be reminded of them, then maybe you could use a little shot in the arm as well. My goal here is to just give you things to think about. Every episode has been written that way. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not baiting you with anyone or of a super secret method or anything like that. Just giving you things to think about so that you, in your own unique way, can come up with solutions or methods to move forward and toward and achieve your highest creative goals. Way back in episode 14, called Creative Self-Care, I touched on the topic of talking about how my wife's and I's entire home is somewhat of a gallery of our creative output. Both my wife and I are artists and creators, and our home has become a showcase of and a reflection of who we are, not just as people, but also as artists. And it's not just our own creations on display, but those of our favorite musicians and visual artists. There's also a lot of natural elements like driftwood sculptures and crystals and various forms of photography and painting. In short, our whole home is a creative space. We do have separate studio spaces. I have a room for my music audio production and a separate room in the attic for glass art. And my wife also has her own room for her jewelry creations. Sometimes we overlap on the dining room table, but it's all good. That happens, and it has to happen sometime. But to set yourself up with a space dedicated to your art, your craft, or your hobby, whatever you want to call it, is a massive investment in yourself. Maybe you're taking over the spare room or just the dining room table for a weekend, or even setting yourself up with a little fold-out TV table for your laptop. Once you do that, you've created space. You've given yourself permission. And even if that table has to get folded up and squirreled away when you're not using it, make sure the space for that table is not going to get filled in when you're doing your regular household stuff. I know how hard this is to pull off, to have it happen. Once upon a time, this house had 3 kids, 3 dogs, and at one point, a wonderful auntie who also lived with us for many years. She, too, was a creator, a seamstress by trade, so she never got too freaked out by our collective hustle and bustle. I'm grateful that our home is big enough to accommodate all these things of wares and supplies. But even if you find yourself spinning around looking for what you might dedicate as your own creative space, never forget that the most valuable creative space you have is already with you, right between your ears. Use that space. Decorate it with good intentions, pure motivation. The actual room for your next step is going to allow that studio between your ears to take shape. One of my newer music students has been telling me about his inability to practice at home due to a lack of space. They just had their daughter and granddaughter move back in with them, and the 2 houses combined into one has not worked out so well space-wise. But he told me this week that he's pretty sure he's figured out a way to get some creative work done. It's an act of purging. He's making a creative space for himself with the intention of clearing out old things which have collected a lot of dust, and some have lost their sentimentality. He's doing this to make room for something new and exciting for himself. And this purge wasn't huge in its volume of things or stuff removed, but the actual act of doing it has opened up room for him to practice. And it's also helped him begin to identify himself as a musician, which is cool. The onus for practice is now firmly set upon him, and he's actually really excited. And here's what he did. It's not much. He moved a few stacks of boxes and books out from under a desk, which made room for him to pull a chair up to sit comfortably at with his music book in front of him. That's it. We all have that kind of space which seems to end up as the catch-all for the day's debris. That place in the kitchen where things tend to pile up. That corner which often tends to get piled up with just stuff. These seemingly unimportant or unnecessary spaces, whatever you want to call them, they get cluttered up and overflow. And there seems to come a sort of critical tipping point where if enough of these spaces are allowed to happen, we lose a lot of our overall space. And this is not a lecture on good housekeeping, because believe me, I have quite a few spaces like that here. So my student, who at this point of recording this part of the podcast has now had 2 consecutive weeks of daily practice. He has actually grown immensely, more than in the past 6 months that he's been with me. You see, he would always come into his lesson and apologize first to me for not practicing. And I would always tell him, okay, I get it. If you don't have time and space to make these things happen at home, let's make the best of your time while you're here. And I'm the last guy who's going to get all heavy on a student for not being able to make time or space for practice, because I know that it wasn't probably until 5 years after I started playing that I actually started taking it seriously. And that would have me at about 15 years old, where I actually started to really go like, whoa, if I practice, I can actually get something out of this. And it wasn't that I was looking for attention. I was finding creative satisfaction. Suddenly, I could do stuff. So everyone comes to the realization that they only get out of it what they put into it. But sometimes folks just want to keep coming back to our sessions as a creative outlet. However brief in their week, it's something that's a part of themselves deeply craves some creative time. And our time spent together as student and teacher is buoying and motivating for both of us. The very seed for this podcast was planted after I finally started writing one day about making a video about how to help students stay engaged with lesson material in the arts, predominantly. I've had parents of students and students tell me for years that when they listen in to our lessons, they said, you should make a podcast about all these things that you talk about with your students. And somehow I never took it too seriously until the one day I sat down to write out some ideas for it, and the floodgates opened. I didn't have to make space for it because I was just making notes on my phone. But once I got started, the ball just kept on rolling. And now here we are, 51 episodes in. So that creative space between your ears is the actual starting point. Fostering, feeding, and fanning the flames of a mindset focused on creative goals is step 1. By making physical space, even if it's just that fold-up table, you're making room in your environment for your new creative adventures. And in doing so, you're grounding these often whimsical motivations into your reality. Your physical reality is a reflection of your inner reality. That's what I believe anyway. By making a space for yourself to engage with those creative ideas, you're doing much more than just making, quote, space. You're making your inspirations into reality. And don't take it lightly. You, as an artist, are bringing beauty into this world. And who doesn't want beautiful things around them? As for routines, I can tell you about how I conduct myself or manage my time, familial, domestic responsibilities on an hour-by-hour basis. But what works for me might not work for you, and vice versa. First thing, stop dismissing your creative time as not necessary or important. While the general population doesn't often seem to have much interest or belief in their creative abilities, you're on a different track right now. So if you find yourself in the association with folks whose notion of quality time away from work involves going to a bar or staring at the TV for hours on end or playing video games or something stupid, you don't need to let that shape your mindset. You simply cannot dismiss the need for creative time after a while. For me, it's entirely therapeutic as well as productive. I'm a bit of a late riser in the mornings because of the demands of my work time outside of my home are not until the middle of the afternoon. I can take my time in the morning, allow my mind to wander as I make breakfast for us. First thing I do, even before I open my eyes, is I try to recount my dreams. I'm a very vivid dreamer with moments of pretty stark lucidity, meaning I can choose what I dream about. So when I go to sleep with a creative project in mind, something that hasn't taken form yet or is just an idea, I know for certain that I can and will go to my dream state workshop, so to speak, and flesh out the details through the night. Often it'll come to me the next day. It could be a week or two later, but it'll happen. And if I describe this to people, they usually look at me and say like, whoa, what are you smoking before bed? Implying that I'm hallucinating or something. But alas, no, I'm pretty much in full control of my dream state, especially towards the early morning. I look forward to it, I anticipate it, and I know that some of my most well-received creative products, whether it be glass or music or whatever, are the product of this dream state's time. Now, maybe that sounds weird to you. That's okay. Some people don't remember any dreams to the point that they will insist that anyone who has dreams is either lying or they just put it down to your subconscious running amok while you sleep. And like I said, what works for one might not work for another. After breakfast, I generally take a second cup of coffee up to my music studio, where I am right now, and fire up the computer to work on either scripting ideas for the podcast, recording the podcast, which I'm doing right now, or work on song production for clients. And this is where I switch from that sort of mystical haze of being half in a dream state and half in the real world and get down to technical things, like things with computers and tools. It's a different mindset for me, as I tend to think a lot in imagery and not in words so much. So it takes a while to get those images through my brain's translator into some sort of actionable prompts or words. Since I've been doing this podcast, so I've noticed my typing skills have improved, so that's kind of cool. I used to write everything out by hand, but I just found that the hand strain was way more than I could handle when I still had so many other things to do with my hands during the day. Because I teach music an average of 3 to 6 hours a day, except Sunday, I need my hands to be nimble as part of my job. Between guitar, piano, ukulele, and percussion instruments, I probably put in a solid 2 to 5 hours of playing each day, if I were to sort of sum up all the time and stick it together. The nighttime is when I switch gears into matters of my own projects, my own goals, my after work time, so to speak. I go to do different work. And it's not unusual for me to be up until 1, maybe 2 a.m., either hands-on working on stuff or at least in the writing, designing phase of something. And sometimes I can do this in bed using a few different apps that I have on my phone. Other times I'm up in my studio here doing stuff, or downstairs in the basement shop doing stuff. And it's kind of funny that on weekends, I tend to look forward to going to bed between like 8 and 9 o'clock. Last night, I think I set a new personal record and made it to bed before 10 o'clock, which was really kind of weird for me. But I'm not one of those folks who likes to brag about how little sleep I need or how little sleep I get. You know those people, right? I usually get a good 8 hours every night, and it's just my schedule. that is about 90 degrees off from what most folks is, because I've been this way since about 1994 when I started teaching in-person music lessons as my full-time gig. Combined with some weekends doing event DJ gigs and stuff, it's all about music for me. And those gigs usually don't happen in the morning. They happen at night, and that's why my schedule is the way it is. It's not the most glamorous life, but I can't say I would have had it any other way. So this routine I have isn't so much a schedule I've told myself I have to follow. It's just the way my life is at this point. And I'm very, very grateful to say that I enjoy everything that I do as far as work goes. There's never really a chance I'll fall into one of those same old type of patterns when I go to work. But say if you're just starting out, maybe you have a day job too, kids and all that other good stuff. You have to make time. You have to carve it out of your schedule. And people might think that you're being selfish with your hobby, but it's not just a hobby to you. I'm sure it's not. It becomes a mindset, a way of being, and soon to be a way of life if you stick to it. Give yourself even 5 minutes each day to dream, imagine, whatever. Write down and reread those things regularly. You'll get some great ideas, and chances are you'll start forgetting them if you don't take the time for making a creative journal of some sort. Make notes on your phone, record voice memos of lyrics and melodies, video your moves, whatever it takes, make a record of your thoughts and ideas. And this will become a well that you can come back to in times of slow or low motivation, or when new ideas just aren't flowing the way you want them to or expect them to. So, to sum it all up, start with the creative space between your ears. Moment to moment upkeep and fueling. Then make a space, however small or large. Dedicate some kind of physical, actual, third-dimensional space to your art and your craft. One which signals your mind and body that it's creative time when you go to it. And along the way, write every single thing down. No matter how great the next new idea is, you'll forget that you even had that idea when the next one comes along. Totally take the time to enjoy the rush and the flow of it, but don't let that sweep all of your great ideas out to sea in the process. You have to stay focused. There's your pep talk. Now go get to work. So I said it a few times in there, and I said it very intentionally. Don't think of your creative time or your creative space as being selfish. You might have a family member. I used to have a bitter spouse who would look upon my time with my art and creativity as cutting into her time where she could make me do things. And she would tell me how selfish I am for being that way. But you can't do that. You can't think of your time taken for your own benefit as being selfish. Neither should you take the space and think of the space as you being selfish. You've got things to do. Your things take time, and your things take space. Go get to work.